Good morning and welcome everyone. I'm absolutely delighted that you're here to join us today. My name is Jan Day. I am on the AWS Higher Education Business Development team focused on community building. And I'm delighted to see members of our community here and learning from one another. So a little bit of housekeeping. If you could silence your phone. In case of emergency, if we have to exit the building, we'll go out to the back, down to the right, and out to the street. Restrooms are just literally next door here to the right. And let's get started. You are in the best session happening right now. It is serving up remote access to software for students.
There we go.
And before I introduce our two speakers, I wanted to first say what touched me about their story that you're going to hear is it is really a powerful story about digital transformation and the culture and the technology and the tools that you can have in place to really make a change. They have an innovative mindset. You're going to hear about that. The flexibility that allowed the team to make a pivot at the beginning of this pandemic that we've been enjoying. They always kept their customers, the students and faculty, and the mission of teaching and learning at the center of what they were doing. And of course, it took a team, very collaborative, to make what you're going to hear happen. And last but not least, it was bold. And so I hope you'll be as happy as I am to hear them tell this story and share their insights and lessons learned with you. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Brandon Rich, Enterprise Architect at the University of Notre Dame, and Kevin Streit, VDI Program Manager from the University of Notre Dame. Thank you.
Good morning. So again, my name is Kevin Streit. I am a program manager for VDI at University of Notre Dame. I've been at the Notre Dame for about the last 10 years and have only really started working with the AWS side of things just in this past year and a half as COVID kicked off. With me this morning is Brandon Rich.
Hi folks, I'm Brandon Rich. I'm an enterprise architect at Notre Dame. Started out as an application developer and a technical architect, and so I've been working with AWS for some time now, as we've been a cloud-first organization for a few years. And let's see. That's what I want to start with. So back in 2013, 2014, say, we experienced some high traffic events, let's say, to our main website, nd.edu. And this was very instructive as things sort of went down. We had some, heavy traffic come to our front door. We realized we need to start looking at what the cloud can offer. And we'd heard about AWS, and we had some folks come down and visit us and kind of show us what is possible with Amazon Web Services. And so this started small. We transformed our main website into an auto-scaled site and kind of went from there. We declared we're going to go cloud first. This has started off small, but it's really working for us. We need what the cloud offers. You can see it on the slide there. That has been our kind of driving force in our cloud first initiative. Cost is part of it. You see it in one of those bubbles, but scalability, agility, flexibility, those are really the things that drove us. It was the functionality and the capabilities that we could get from the cloud that drove us to do this. And what we declared was we are going to move 70%, actually we later made it 80% of our services to the cloud in 3 years. We set a goal, we put together a cross-functional team from all across our Office of Information Technologies and made it a concerted effort to upskill people, to go to conferences, to learn, to educate, to bring people from all parts of the organization to make this reality, and we did it. And eventually, we cleared out the data centers, we repurposed them for training and other things, and so it was really a big success. So if you jump forward several years from that to 2019, we are still in a cloud-first ethos. We've kind of lifted and shifted everything. The racks are all gone. But we still want to mature in different areas. So in fall of 2019, we undertook an assessment of VDI that we'll get into. And this is really part of our sort of 4 pillars of strategy that we said that we want to focus on, because we want to continue to invest, we want to get better in the cloud. We want to focus on different areas. So storage is a big one. We've got a massive storage program starting right now to kind of revolutionize the way that we approach storage and bring it into a little more like sort of coherent strategy. Research is a big area that I'll talk about more later. Media, we've got a massive media production we call Indie Studios that has, think about that 80%. A lot of the 20% that's still on campus is that media production facility. So how can we make that sort of a cloud native thing in the future? And finally, VDI, or virtual desktop infrastructure, which is why you're all here. So if you're not familiar with the offerings that AWS has in this space, Workspaces is the main one, and Amazon AppStream 2.0, which is what we're going to be talking about primarily. The difference. Workspaces is sort of your laptop in the cloud. It is one-to-one with a person. They're persistent. It's like, there are many like it. This one is mine. It's still centrally managed. You get all the advantages of having a centralized workspace that you can administrate centrally, but with AppStream, things are a little bit different because what you have instead are transient instances. I log in, I get a fresh session every time. The changes I make don't persist unless we as the central administrators sort of carve off certain parts of the file system to say that they will persist. That's a feature that we've ended up using, but it's a very different paradigm. It's the reason for the cows. It's more like the servers as cattle metaphor, if you've ever heard that in terms of cloud. It means you're not specifically crafting compute instances to serve a purpose. You're kind of managing things as a fleet or a herd. I actually liken it specifically with AppStream. It's like Little Caesars. You can walk in. They want to be able to hand you a pizza just as soon as you walk in, give you that great experience of like, I'm hungry now. I want the pizza now. So they keep things hot and ready, and that's how AppStream works. With the scaling capabilities you have on the back end, you can keep a certain number of instances hot and ready, and that's on-demand instances. And so they'll fire up much faster. And just like with Pizza Place, if that gets low, the scaling in AppStream can say, oh, I need to fire up a few. It's like, I'm going to throw a few more pizzas in the oven so that when the next group of folks come in, then they've got hot and ready pizzas as well. Now, this is what AppStream sort of by default looks like. You don't see a desktop. Now, there is a desktop mode, which was very useful to us in the story that we're about to tell, but by default, you see individual apps in AppStream. So this kind of plays in because this is what we were working with when we did our pilot in the fall of 2019, sort of thinking like one app at a time, no desktop. So I've mentioned this pilot. What does this actually look like? So this was summer, fall. We had taken some stabs at AppStream. AppStream 1.0, wasn't quite what we needed it to be, and we knew that AppStream 2.0 was a thing, but really what kind of kicked this off was that sort of great driver of cloud initiatives. Someone was trying to do it on premises, and we're pretty centralized in terms of IT at Notre Dame, but there's satellite IT offices, and so we knew that we had some folks in our engineering and science computing looking at some on-premises offerings for VDI, and we thought, well, this is a good opportunity for us to go ahead and explore the cloud options that we have and work together and try to do kind of a bake-off and see how things are going to work with AppStream and Amazon. So we launched a pilot focusing on 10 different applications, engineering and science focused, 5 different classes, about 300 students. Of course, we're cloud first. So we wanted to find out, can you do things like run SolidWorks on an iPad or a Chromebook or something low-powered? We wanted to know, is this feasible for us to run and manage? I mean, some of the things we learned in this pilot were not necessarily fantastic from an administrative standpoint because of that sort of app-oriented view that we first saw, that would later change. The iteration time for installing and configuring new apps is very slow, honestly. It would take a long time to kind of get feedback of did this installation work correctly. In AppStream, you have what's called an image builder. Basically, you log into a Windows-style environment, and you can set up your applications there, and you kind of have to bake it and then see what comes back. So we had some success with this, but that cycle time was very slow, and that'll lead in later into the story. But we were interested in performance and what kind of instance sizing is going to allow us to do things like run SolidWorks, these 3D intensive applications. AppStream has a range of instance sizes from your sort of cheapest basic compute, the GPU-focused machines and beyond. So, how's that going to work for the performance that we need for our students, especially in engineering, versus, the price point that we're hoping to hit. So we also wanted to get just feedback from the students and the faculty who use these machines and understand, how is it versus going to a computer lab or going to your desktop? And the feedback, turns out, was really good. People said things like, it saved me a ton of time. We surveyed students. We got a ton of these quotes. It's really great, turns out, to be able to do your homework from your laptop instead of trudging across to the computer lab. Remember, this is pre-COVID. So we're thinking about use cases like, well, it's late, you procrastinate on your homework, the lab's closed, or maybe we're in Indiana, so it's the middle of winter, it's like -10 degrees, you don't want to, these guys know. You don't want to get out of your dorm room. Let me stay in my warm bed and actually do this work. This person said, if I can click it, SolidWorks on a Mac was huge. So that's one of the other benefits that we get out of this virtual desktop infrastructure. You can be multi-platform. Your client can be whatever. AppStream is presenting you a Windows desktop. So if you're a Mac person like I am, you can still get access to these Windows-based applications that you need. People told us it's extremely important to move ahead on this. This is really a valuable technology, and we can see a lot of use for it. So I believe that's where, I've got one more slide. So what do we do out of this effort? So this was at the end of 2019. We didn't know it was coming. We're planning for a program. We think there are a lot of uses for this. So certainly we're thinking about computer labs. We run a lot of general purpose computer labs. There are kind of department specific computer labs. There are a lot of ways that we can get in those lab spaces. We thought there are applications around faculty and staff use cases. Think about, we have a campus workstation program where we give you a laptop and we provision it. So thinking about virtualized desktops, if you lose your laptop, no problem. All your compute, everything you need to keep doing your job, any device will do. It's easy to onboard people. You don't necessarily need to go provision them an expensive machine and give them something off the shelf. We were thinking about how can we transform labs, the physical lab spaces, in a virtualized world. Do we still need them? Or it seems like they're really still very valuable collaborative spaces. So what does a transformation of a physical space look like? And how does it work for research? I'll talk more about that later. So we were thinking there's a lot that we can do with this. And we knew kind of the time that it had taken us to be successful in the pilot. So we were planning for a long kind of program, 18 months maybe. So this was, early January of 2020, we're starting to figure this out. We talked to one of the engineers who was key on that AppStream pilot in the fall. Hey, do you think that we could take our general purpose lab? It's got about 150 apps. Do you think we could do that in AppStream by the fall? He said, there's no way. No way. In the time that we have, it's January, talking about August when students come back for the fall session, could we get our general purpose labs on AppStream?
So then March 2020, if we all look back in time a little bit, a minor event started to trickle in over the first part of 2020. And that was about the time that I was approached and asked if I would help lead the VDI program out of this assessment phase and start into trying to get things into the computer labs, trying to look at things. And honestly, up to this point, I had been part of the assessment peripherally, but it wasn't my main thing. So early, I want to say the last end of April, early March was when I was just starting to warm up to the idea of taking over the VDI program. And then things began to speed up. So in March 2020, as with many universities across the nation, campuses were starting to look at, hey, what is this thing called COVID? What is this pandemic? What is the impact going to be to campuses across the country? And as with many other campuses, we formed our own emergency response team, started to spin up. We, within OIT, the Office of Information Technologies, we put together our own little department operations center to start looking at things. And as you can see, everybody got into this big war room, which soon after, we started to realize that maybe it wasn't so good to be all packed into a closed room together. But our little task force was put under this deadline to say, by the end of the month, we need to have 100 plus titles pushed into some sort of remote learning tool so that students could continue to learn after spring break. So as we know, a lot of students, this all hit about the time that students were on spring break. As with many other campuses, we extended spring break for another week, so the students were all happy. They could continue to party as much as they wanted to until they realized what the repercussions of that might be. So we were under the gun. Time was ticking. We formed our own little task force, got into our own little war room, and started to look at options. And started to put a lot of smart heads together. And we actually did this collaboratively with many other of the IT groups across campus. We had our engineering, science, and computing group together. We had some of our desktop techs that were responsible for labs in our School of Architecture. So we had a lot of people that were coming together to come up with different ideas. Didn't take us too long to realize that maybe if students aren't going to be together, maybe staff shouldn't be together too. So we started piloting our own work from home program, and we all started to join remotely and do the same thing over Zoom, which became our friend. So we started to think, what are our options? We had looked at a few other ones already. AppStream was one. And as the way that Brandon had talked about it, there were some challenges there. We love the concept of scalability. We love the concept of being able to customize the instance types, have high graphic for those in engineering and computing, maybe some that are optimized for stats processing for our business school. But the whole concept of, hey, if it took us 5 months to load 10 different applications, how are we going to get up to 100? It's just not, it's not feasible. And then we looked at Workspaces. We said, hey, Workspaces, everybody likes this. This is, we could lift and shift our image right into there. There might be some challenges because our lab image is really, really big. But the biggest thing for Workspaces is the scalability side of it. I mean, we're not huge. We have 8,000 students, maybe 2,000 more on graduate school, so in that 10,000 range. But if we started to look at a one-to-one transition or one-to-one relationship between students and a workspace environment, that is really not economically feasible. So then we thought, well, we could go old school, right? We could use remote desktop. We could actually have students remote into these physical labs because nobody's going to be here. We'll have all these computer labs that are there. They already have all the software installed on them. It's already tested. It's exactly what students would be used to. But what's that user experience like? Now, we had a relationship with a company called Sassafras that we used to manage our student labs. And they, as many software companies did, rapidly pushed out an option where students could actually see what computers are available. They could click on a link. They could download a remote desktop client. All the student had to do was VPN in. They could open up their RDP client and then access it. And we said, that feels still a little clunky, and our user support experience might not be great for students, and it just might not be good. And there's a scalability side of it. There's only a certain finite number of computers on campus, a lot more students that'll be working from home. Maybe the demand would exceed what we'd be able to provide for them. But the biggest thing that we came up with was this does not support our cloud-first vision. It does not support us beyond COVID. What do we want to look for the future? And management was really supportive of making sure that we did the right thing. We had this struggle between rapidly responding, but still keeping our eyes on the future. Then one of our partners, actually from engineering, science, and computing, stumbled across this great little feature. It was not generally released yet, but it was what we now know as the desktop view that was being limited released out. And we found out about this and we said, hey, how could we use this to our advantage? And we started digging into it, and we realized that if we actually extended Windows Explorer, the desktop experience, out to our image builder, we could then start leveraging SCCM natively that we use to populate our student labs with already the image build that we already had to actually load those in to AppStream. And this was a watershed moment. This was a major light speed moment for us where we suddenly went from, that it took us 5 months to do 10 things, it took us like 2 days to load 100 different applications. And it was game on. So very shortly, we realized we could do something like this. This is what our AppStream desktop looks like for our standard computer lab or a standard virtual lab for students. And it was very similar. We actually used the same exact desktop background that we did on our physical labs, and we added a little bit of notes on the side that said, hey, guess what? This is also an ephemeral environment. When you log out, go away. So make sure you use your Google Drive integration, which was great. We already use Google Drive for our students to store their personal files and work files, and AppStream had a Google Drive integration already built into it. So we very quickly realized that we could use take advantage of AppStream to make it anytime, any place, any device. Because we started thinking about, we've got students all over the world, and they would now be able to access their learning environment right from wherever it was. I mean, whether it was an iPad, whether it was from a Mac, whether it was from a PC, this is what they could do. And it really fit into our cloud-first vision. So how do we deliver it up? We had already had something called Inside ND, where people were able to go out and access, they could search for whatever application that they were looking for. We put out a virtual lab portal where they could see whether it was the general purpose lab, whether it was the lab specifically for engineering, science, and computing, School of Architecture, a stat that was specifically built for stats, for processing. So it fit based off of the instance type that was needed. So that was one of the beauties with AppStream is, hey, if I needed a graphics heavy or compute optimized or memory optimized, whatever fit the need, we could throw out a lab specific to them. So what do we end up with? Well, within 30 days after the students came back, well, they didn't come back, they went home, they got their stuff, they went back home, and they realized they were going to be doing remote learning for the rest of the semester. Within 30 days of going live, we had this over 1,000 students from 15 countries in 28 states log over 16,000 hours of time in AppStream, being able to continue their remote learning experience, which was absolutely key for the university, making sure that students could still get the learning that they needed, even if it was sitting in the comforts of their own home, safely being able to continue their academic experience.
So, the thing that I'm really happy about with all this, not only that we did it, that we were able to do it the right way. Our cloud architect couldn't be here with us today. He was really instrumental in this process. And throughout, as we're rushing, as we're trying out different ideas, trying to figure out what's going to make this work in the time that we need for students to come back for remote learning, he was always kind of in my ear going, we can still script this. We can automate things. We can do things the right way. Let's take a breath right now and figure out, hands off the console. Let's write scripts. Let's do things that we're going to be able to use to operationalize this as we go forward. And so I'm happy to say that we did exactly that. So this is sort of a cartoony look at how our deployments work. We have a multi-account strategy for just about everything. I mean, as I described with our Cloud First initiative, it was very much a lift and shift, and I would say that at first it was not particularly cloud native. We kind of took what we did at home and we moved it up and sort of translated it as one-to-one as we could in AWS. But now we're looking at doing things in a much more cloud native way, and multi-account strategy is part of that. Let's break off things into different accounts, let the account be the kind of security and permission boundary for different purposes. So in this case, what you can see is we have a dedicated staging account for VDI. We have a dedicated production account. In the middle, we have something that actually goes back a little further for us. It's a shared services account. So each of these serves a different purpose. Kevin mentioned SCCM and how critical that was for us. We looked at things during that rapid R&D phase, like, oh man, like could we just take our image that we use on campus with Windows and just like chunk that into like a workspace or something. And there are all kinds of little challenges. It's actually too big. It's bigger than Workspaces will allow. And I'll say, shout out one of many to our account team. That was something they were actually able to get us a direct line to the end user computing folks in AWS and get that size limit moved and expanded. So that was an option. But the fact that we were able to go into desktop mode on AppStream and use the same tools that we use to automate the lab builds at home on premises was huge. So in the staging account, we fire up our image builder for AppStream. We start SCCM, yeah, MECM now, by the way, if you want more acronyms. It's changed. And that's pointed to our shared services account, where we have the distribution point for SCCM. So we do all of our building there, and then we test there. So we point Okta. Every one of these AppStream stacks has an IDP set up to our identity provider, which is Okta. We do all our testing there and staging, and then we share those images over to the production account. At which point, you'll see in a minute, it kicks off a step function. And the step function detects that an image has been shared over, and CloudFormation scripts have been touched, and that kicks off our blue-green deployment. So we know there's a new image. We've got a load balancer between two different stacks, a blue stack and a green stack. So we start to spin down one of them, reduce the number of instances in the stack, and then cut over the load balancer. So there's never an interruption of service. If you log in while this is going on, you're going to get whatever the load balancer is pointed to, and eventually you're going to get a session for the new image. So this is a little bit of a look at the step function that does that. So we have CloudFormations for each of the stacks, has parameters, like what are the scaling parameters that we need at a given time. So right now we update that with an image ID based on that new image that we just shared over. So that CloudFormation update kicks off this whole process, and the state machine watches for the new stack to be ready with the new image and does the swap of the ALB from one to the other. So that's all automated. We've also automated backups. So again, a dedicated account for backups. That might be what we call Dr. Data, DR data for disaster recovery. Some of these have goofy names. But our dedicated backup account. There's an automation that basically says, in the production account, watch for CloudWatch events when a new image is shared over and launched, just like we saw. There's an automation account in between that's run by our cloud platform services team. So they've got listeners on these CloudWatch events that says, okay, is this a new image that's just come through? If so, we're going to launch it over here in this backup account. We're going to launch it in the image builder, essentially. And there is a script on the image that says, where am I? Am I in the backup account? If I am, and I'm new, then I'm going to snapshot myself. So that snapshot gets saved in the backup account, also gets shared to the production account for like a hot backup. Hot's maybe not the right word, but you know, a readily accessible backup there in production if we need it. So there's this cycle here of any time that we push a new image, it's going to get saved and backed up for us.
So with all this great framework that the really smart design architects and working with our AWS partners put together, we started to look at, there were some other success factors as well that we partnered with, and I wanted to make sure that we had some honorable mentions to those. So we used CloudWatch, we used Tableau, we used Qualtrics, all together to be able to look at things like scalability, to look at things like metrics, to look at utilization, look at feedback from students. So I wanted to go over those a few with you just to kind of give you a better picture of how we manage the big picture of things, not just from the technical side. So CloudWatch dashboard. So one of the things within AWS that we can look at is fully utilize these little widgets that we can build out for each of our stacks. Because as we talked about, AppStream, one of the big benefits is scalability. But we wanted to make sure that we aren't over-provisioning to what actual utilization is being set at. So each of the stacks, we would, typically when we went live, we over-provisioned. We said, we have no idea how many students are going to be logging in, so let's make sure that we can start at a certain minimum level so that it can scale up as needed, but if an entire class logs in at one time, it'll make sure that there's already pre-provisioned in this on-demand state a certain number of instances ready for them to go. So we would oftentimes use that, but we would use CloudWatch to go back and look and say, where's that sweet spot of proper scaling? When are students logging in? So we started to, after we went live through the summer and into the fall, we started realizing that, hey, certain stacks really had classes using them on Monday, Wednesday, Fridays versus Tuesday, Thursday. So we created CloudFormation scripts specific to those days so that they would have different scaling schedules for those days. Great tool. Tableau, using Athena, which is the data tool within AWS, we pulled that predefined Athena data out into Tableau, so we could write some dashboards for management so you could see what stacks are getting the most utilization. And then we paired that data with the student IDs so we know what degree that student was taking, so we knew what college. Were the business students using just the business stacks, or were they also using the general purpose stacks, or were they also using engineering stacks? So we'd ask ourselves, why are the business students using the engineering stacks? But we would be able to look at that and say, where are students migrating to? So we get some better big pictures. One of the ones that I'm glad we really did early on was using qualtrics. So when a student logs out of their AppStream stack, there's a redirect feature that's used, and we actually took that redirect and sent them over to Qualtrics, and it passed through the stack that they were coming from, so we could look at the form and know, are they coming from an engineering stack? Are they coming from a stats stack? Are they coming from the general purpose stack? And then we would present them with just a simple question. What was your user experience like on a scale of 1 to 5? Give us 5 stars. Thank you very much. If you want to leave a comment, you can, and close it out. But if you had a less than ideal experience and you scored us a 1 to 3, we would then pop up a little smart form that says, okay, so what was your issue? Was it, I couldn't find the software that I was looking for? Did I get an error message? Did I get logged out? Was it just slow? What are, we give them a list of things to ask, and depending on what they chose, if we said, hey, I couldn't find the software I was looking for, we would actually present them a link that says, click on this link and it'll tell you what stacks have what software. Or just write in the box, what is the software that you're looking for? Maybe we don't have it, maybe we should have it. We gave them a speed test, so if they said it was slow, we said click on this button, it would actually pop up a speed test. It would say, from your location back to the AWS farm in Virginia, what is that latency like? What is the ping? So it was a great way to get feedback directly from students that we would then look into it, and depending on what kind of issue they were having, we would follow up with the student to get more information from them. So what are some other lessons learned we take away from this? Software licensing, that was a bit of a arduous process. During COVID, we kind of took wartime privileges and said, we're going to load all of our software out there, and then we're going to follow up. So then that summer, we basically went through our entire list of software and said, is it okay if we put this out in AppStream? Are you okay if we do this in virtualized? And we went down through the list, and there were some vendors that were like, no, you can't do that, sorry. So we'd have to pull that back, or we'd have to negotiate with them on licensing to be able to work things out. So and some stuff just didn't run. So there was softwares that were, AppStream really runs in a Windows 10 environment, or Windows Server environment, and it just didn't always cooperate right. The other thing was make sure we're coordinating with your AWS. We have some great partners and professional services with them that we reached out to them and said, hey, what do you think of this? Can you review what we've done? Is there anything that we missed? Are there things that we should be thinking about that we're just in our tunnel vision we're not seeing? So leverage them. They're great partners to work with.
I actually want to stay on that point for just a second. We have enterprise support at Notre Dame with AWS, and so we've always had a great account team, including a technical account manager, and our solutions architect and account managers. And it was really valuable to have those resources during this time. Our TAM was helping us kind of clear roadblocks as we went. There are always, especially when you start up new accounts, there are account limits, soft limits that you need to put in cases and get those bumped up. So basic things like that we had help with, but even the communication. This desktop thing was new. We were getting it opened up to us before it was made generally available. We had things like the image size limit. We were really getting a lot of help from people inside Amazon. And the thing that really blew me away is that, this is the middle of March 2020. We're seeing from a higher ed perspective the dominoes start to fall as all these other schools are announcing their closing and remote learning plans. We realize, this is really happening. We have to do something. And I can only imagine the pressure and the demand that puts on a team like the end user computing team at AWS. And in the middle of all that, we got to talk to them. We got to talk to some of the highest up folks in the end user computing part of AWS. And I just can't believe, we're taking up a half hour of their time talking about our specific problems in the middle of all this chaos. Massively valuable to us, and we really thank our team and the AWS folks for that. what we learned in all this is really when you invest time and resources into strategic planning, professional development, those key partnerships, it's not only going to carry you through a crisis like the one that it did for us, but it's going to give you flexibility. It's going to help you reach your desired future state with agility. And we've seen that there are a lot of other applications that we're ready for now that we have this experience. One is in research, the other is in surveillance testing, which we did for COVID. So starting with research, part of this was prompted by our new provost, Dr. Marilyn Miranda, who came to us from Rice and has a research initiative that she's been running for years called the Children's Environmental Health Institute. And this became for us a project where we needed to move that lab from Rice to Notre Dame. And it turns out that AppStream is great for compliant research workloads like this because we need to be able to give the research team access to, in this case, health data. And the traditional ways that we could do that, you bring your own device or a Notre Dame provisioned device. We're talking VPNs, we're talking secure enclaves, things like that. But one of the things we've learned is, well, with VDI, with AppStream, you don't need a VPN. You don't need a managed endpoint. I don't have to care what kind of computer you're running or whether you've got antivirus or what your home network is like. We can give you access to things inside the data center without some of the security constraints that we would normally have to deal with. So you can see a little bit of what that resulting cloud design looks like. And but all that access for the researchers can be from anywhere in the world with something like AppStream. And that has great application for research, but also just for staff and faculty applications as well. Now, I do have to put an asterisk by this because, much like we are beholden to the software vendors and their terms, the researchers are beholden to the terms of the people that provide the data they work on. And so this one, because of some of those terms, we're not able to deploy in the cloud yet. We're hoping, maybe eventually. But what this has led to is we've got a framework now for future cases like this, and we're already starting to work on the next one. What's the next research and compliance opportunity that we can use AppStream for? I mean, we really think that there are a lot of advantages with AppStream for researchers. One is just, those things that I mentioned of being able to securely connect from any place. We don't have to worry about that. It's easy to onboard new researchers. For us, it's just adding a person to an Okta group. You don't have to, procure them hardware and make sure it's set up the same way as everybody else's. There's that security aspect that we talk about, especially when you're dealing with data that may have a compliance requirement around it. For the faculty sponsors, the researchers themselves, we've heard that a lot of times those folks end up sort of doing IT work on the side, basically, because they're supporting their teams with these machines that they've kind of provisioned themselves and figured out how to work with in the context of their projects. So a faculty member who really needs to be spending their time on that valuable research is instead troubleshooting a graduate student's computer because, I don't know, it's a person's personal laptop and something has drifted, but there's no real configuration drift to worry about with VDI and with AppStream because you fire up another instance, it's a brand new instance, it's a clean slate. It also sets researchers up for the road ahead. I mean, at the beginning of a grant, you don't have to think about your CapEx spending and what am I going to need 5 years down the road because like everything in the cloud with AWS, it scales. So you don't have to worry about being under-provisioned down the road. And also, of course, it just gives you the ability to do more cloud-native things. If your computer's in the cloud, your data's in the cloud, you can take advantage of that co-location. You can take advantage of other services like SageMaker or whatever you want to connect to your data. So let's talk surveillance a little bit. In the middle of all this, we were actually trying to do these things concurrently. So much going on last year. We heard, okay, surveillance testing is something we want to do. You wouldn't believe how fast this came together. The person who's in charge of this told me, in July, I didn't know what surveillance testing meant. And by September, we had it stood up, really by late August. And one of the things that we needed to do is give data scientists, actually from that same research team, because everybody was pitching in to help from all corners of the university, those data scientists need access to the COVID data so that they can start creating cohorts for who should we surveillance test, who should get pulled in on a given day as a whole big operation. Turns out, boy, you really can't see that picture, but that's okay. It's a big sprawling ecosystem of systems. But AppStream was really key for that. How do we give those researchers access to the COVID data in a secure way? I know, we just did it. We did it with computer labs. We did it with the research program. We know how to do AppStream. We know it can give you that secure remote access. So this became the entry point for those people to kick off this whole workflow that traverses all of these boxes of who gets tested and when do they test and what are the results and how does that feedback. There's a whole other presentation I could give on everything that's going on in this picture. It's a fun story, but our cloud abilities, our cloud skills that we've built up over all these years were a huge part of our being able to execute this and have our COVID response be as successful as it was. Because we were one of the first universities. It's kind of unbelievable to me. Back in May, our president said, May of 2020, said, we're opening in the fall. That was a gutsy move, and it really kicked off a lot of work for us in scrambling to figure out how do we make this successful? How do we do health checks, contact tracing? How do we do testing on campus? How do we do surveillance testing? How do we do quarantine isolation? A whole lot of stuff went into that. But I'm really proud of the way it turned out, especially with surveillance testing. I think that helps us find those asymptomatic folks before they can contribute to more community spread. We can get them safely into quarantine and isolation. So I'm proud to say that cloud architecture and the way that AppStream fit in there with surveillance testing really helped us flatten the curve and have a successful semester. I mean, this is taken toward the end of the semester. We set up all these sort of outdoor distance things for students to be able to do on the lawn there. And we got to the end of the year, and we administered vaccines. We kind of brought everything full circle. I know our students didn't love the fact that they had a pretty lockdown presence on campus all year, but in contrast to a lot of their friends, they got to be there. Our campaign the whole year was sort of branded here, H-E-R-E. We're here at Notre Dame. We're here for each other. We're here for the world. And so everybody sort of pulled together. And I'm really proud of the way that we as an IT organization were able to use our cloud skills to make that a reality.
So where do we go from here? So from a VDI program standpoint, once we rolled out virtual labs, we kind of fine-tuned things from the spring of March 2020 over the summer, prepared for the fall, got things through the fall. And we felt like we've got the academic side, we've got our foundation for the research side, we helped out with the COVID. So then we began looking at other opportunities around campus. And one of the things that we've looked into was administrative applications. So there's a lot of administrative applications that were installed around campus that were had been put into another tool called Remote App. And we said, the Remote App architecture that we're hosting right now is a bit complex. We could simplify that if we moved all those out of Remote App into AppStream. So we spent the last year getting 30, 40 plus applications out of that Remote App, migrated over into AppStream. We have also looked at things like doing staff computing. So we did a small pilot to say, what would it mean if we gave people a very thin provisioned machine and they actually access the applications that would normally be locally installed in AppStream? So we did a pilot around that. We're continuing to look at research opportunities. So there's a lot of different ways that we can use AppStream and VDI for campus users.
So just the last word on this is, it doesn't happen on its own. What we were able to do in those 2 weeks in the spring and in all the months of the COVID response was a result of our investment in strategy way back in 2013 when we realized, like the poster says, we need what the cloud offers. And we skilled up in that. And those investments paid off over time so that when the crisis hit, we were ready for it. And we're continuing to grow. You remember those pillars. There are all kinds of places where we're trying to get better and better at the way that we use cloud to be better at our operations and serve the university better. And we're really happy to be able to talk to all of you here in the room and on YouTube perhaps later, because we would like we'd like to learn from you. Hope we can impart some things that we've learned, but especially in higher ed's community. And we would love to talk to any of you who would maybe like to connect. We've started a Google group to try to get this conversation going, and specifically for folks who are practitioners of VDI in higher ed. It occurred to me when I put this slide together, I don't know what that gets you, this email address. If you're interested in joining that group, please come talk to me. We can make sure that you're added to it. And we've got a great group of folks already. There are a lot of people doing great things with AppStream. If you know anybody at Cornell, they're very good in this. So please come talk to us. We'd be happy to discuss. And with that, we say thank you, and we show you the QR code for the survey. Like and subscribe, 5 stars, whatever. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much.
So we do have about 5 minutes left, and there is mics available that they would be willing to pass around. So if there's anybody that has a question they want to open to the forum, we'd love to take some time.
Yes, for my question, it seems like Notre Dame is very much a leader in AWS. Do a lot of, I mean, you had the Google group there, but do a lot of universities come up to you and say, hey, we see what you're doing, we want to try and do something similar, we kind of want to follow what you're doing, or hey, we have this idea, we want to bounce it off? I mean, it just seems like, I don't understand the history there, like what kind of prompted the cloud first in the first place? Was it just like somebody had a bright idea and it really took off? Or was it more we see other universities doing that? I'm just really curious because Notre Dame's featured a lot on the AWS website for the test cases, and you guys really seem to be a leader there.
Yeah, we have kind of been, especially early on. I mean, I think we were pretty early to it in the higher ed space. We had some very forward-thinking people, the folks that preceded me in this enterprise architect position, Sharif Najim, Mike Chappell, who's the director of infrastructure at the time, Bob Whining was another who was an enterprise architect. Really had the vision for what that could be, and the opportunity there with those prominent traffic events said, this is a good opportunity to try some of these things out. I mean, we knew that the cloud was something we needed to be looking into as an IT organization. How can it help us? So the idea of scalability, flexibility, software-defined infrastructure was very appealing to us, and that was a great entry point. So we sort of started with, we had 4 major projects that we wanted to kick over to the cloud. And the success of those individual projects led us to this entire initiative.
It also seems like is this turned on? Yeah, it seems like the business school really seems to embrace the cloud as well. Like I often get ads for the Mendoza, executive program and their partnership with A Cloud Guru. Was it something similar that started that, or was it kind of their own thing? You guys met up, or just because I've really seen Mendoza be really big on the cloud and AWS.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the funny part is a couple of the architects that Brandon was referring to with Sharif and Mike, they have actually now gone from OIT into faculty at Mendoza, and we've actually had some of our very strong cloud proponents have a large presence within Mendoza. So they have naturally brought that cloud vision to Mendoza and have since kind of passed that up through, driving it from the faculty side. And we partnered with them very well with getting a lot of their software available. I know for the executive program that comes out of Chicago, they oftentimes host their MSBA class via a AppStream portal to give students, a lot of the executive students that come in with laptops that are locked down, and they can't install software on those laptops based off of security privileges, depending on if they're using a corporate provided laptop. So being able to offer them an alternative using AppStream to log into, they don't have to worry about having that technical issues. And one of the big benefits of that virtual lab, we didn't really speak to it, is giving a consistent experience for all students. So if I've got a $2,000 laptop versus I've got an $800 laptop, I've got an old laptop versus a new laptop, AppStream doesn't matter, because all it is a browser. So if you log in, you're going to get that consistent experience. And faculty especially appreciate that, because now they don't have to worry about doing student support. So if they have hey, I can't get this configured, or I can't get this plugin configured, or this application won't install on my laptop, oftentimes it's the faculty member that goes, hey, let me see what I can do for you. They don't have to do that anymore. So being able to provide a consistent and learning experience for students in AppStream has been a big plus. And I think Mendoza has embraced some of that, partially because of some of the participants that are now in the school that are really pushing that cloud vision.
Yeah, the business school, by the way, Mendoza College of Business. One second, I just want to make one point about what you said about it not really matter what type of laptop you have. I think that's a great sort of equalizer of VDI. It's an equity thing, and we have a lot of well-off students at Notre Dame, but not everybody has access to, that computer that can really, smoke, what do you call it, SolidWorks. So to be able to give that to everybody on an even playing field is really great. Yeah.
So following up on that question, one of the hurdles I've seen in higher ed is the different delivery models of IT, particularly at larger institutions, and there's a lot of resistance for like the centralized system to adopt cloud. What are you seeing, like, are there schools within larger systems that are actually moving to the cloud independently of their higher ed parent?
That's a good question. We certainly benefit from being quite centralized. We have sort of satellite IT within campus, but we're not a huge system like IU or California. Some of our colleagues that we've talked to. So it definitely, there can be a lot more challenges to getting traction in those systems because those campuses all have a lot more individual autonomy. So sometimes it happens sort of in parallel. Yeah, I have less experience with that, but I've definitely heard from folks at those kind of schools that it can be a completely different dynamic.
Have you considered the paradigm shift that was required to go from a computer is in a lab behind a locked door? There's some inherent just security factors that are there. How did you address the paradigm shift for security going to VDI?
I mean, one of the benefits of AppStream from a security perspective is it is an ephemeral environment. So when they log out, it's wiped clean. We can also set up a lot of the security models based off the account. So when we set up a account for the kind of the student computing side of things, so at the AWS level, account level, we can set up different firewall rules, we can set up different security rules from a student standpoint versus a different account that we set up for research versus what we set up for administrative versus what we set up for staff. So the account structure plays into a lot of the security design as well to make sure that what a student sees or what a student has access to is going to be very limited from, say, what a researcher has. So they're in a separate divided. Again, the ephemeral side is great because if there was anything that went wrong on that instance, it's wiped clean. Workspaces is a one-to-one and it's persistent. AppStream is a one-to-many and it just reloads a new image every time it comes in. So from a support standpoint, it's great because it's that consistent user experience. If you're looking for something that's more persistent, where it is more like my computer, that's where something like Workspaces might be more applicable than, say, where AppStream is a fresh one. So from a paradigm shift from a physical computer, I think we were able to meet all the security requirements and be able to provide a very similar experience to what a student will have in a physical lab.
Time. Ooh, hey, we've hit our time. We'd be happy to talk to anybody who wants to stick around after, but thank you all for coming.
Thank you.